what Sophos Central email is. But for those of you that don't know, it's an email security product that offers next-gen email security.
Central Admin is where I am sitting right now for my MSP CSP demo account. This dashboard is more than just email for Sophos. When you get in here, it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you're coming from Reflection, where all we're dealing with is email from that side. So I did want to start by just giving you just a quick high-level overview of what to expect when you see a customer's dashboard, and maybe also give you an idea of the other services that you have access to at Sophos as well. So on the left side here is where all of your navigation will be, very similar to what you're going to have inside of Reflection. Your main dashboard being an overview for everything that's going on across the board, your alerts, devices, metrics, web control components. And there you can even see the email summary components here. So everything kind of at a high level. You can dive into your alerts to see exactly what is going on from each of the products. Our Threat Analysis Center, this comes into play with our InterceptX Advanced and our XDR tools. This is where you can dive into what happened during a particular attack. Again, we're not going to dive into that here, but this will give you more details and information around attacks inside of your environment. Logs and reports, again, just a generic place to go for all logs for all the products inside of there, all of the event logs, any specific licensing reports, which we'll take a look at a couple of those for email as well. Your people and devices, those are going to be the people that are brought into the system. Again, devices being any endpoints, mobile servers, brought into the system as well. And then we do offer an account health check in here as well. So you can go in and from a security standpoint, just make sure that all of your settings are best practice. Now, at the bottom half of this, we really start getting into the products, and Sophos does offer a wide array of products here, from our endpoint and server protection, our mobile, which is our mobile device management and mobile security, our encryption, full disk encryption for both Windows and Mac, wireless, which is management of the Sophos wireless access points, email security, which is what we will be jumping into here in just a moment, our firewall management, which again is a management dashboard for the Sophos firewall. Our phish threat, this is a phishing training and assessment tool. You can send out campaigns because we are usage-based. You only get billed basically as you send out a campaign. So a great way to train those end users to not fall for those phishing emails. And that actually complements very nicely with the email security package on there as well. Our Cloud Optics is a cloud posture management tool. This gives you insights into your AWS, your Azure, your Google Cloud environments. If you are moving and shifting towards those environments, this is a very good tool to give you insights to make sure that your security posture inside of those environments is meeting all of the requirements and you are not leaving something open inside of those environments. We do have Sophos switches. Those are managed here. And then our MDR is the Sophos MDR service. That is our 24/7 threat hunting that layers on top of the endpoint protection. It brings in all of the components from Sophos, but also third-party telemetry. So if you're not a 100% Sophos shop, it's not a problem. All right, so quick overview aside, let's dive into the email security here. And when you first get into email security, you're going to see your dashboard. This is going to give you the last 30 days statistics on what's coming into the environment, what's going out of the environment, any potential threats that have been identified, the number of protected mailboxes. Again, that inbound activity and outbound activity, this is a great way to figure out, inside of your environment, what's being caught and at what level. You can see we had, 2 impersonation attacks here. The vast majority of the email that is being caught on mine is being tagged for bulk messages. And then I did have 171 legitimate emails coming through the system. And these just give you a quick and easy indicator of, again, what's coming into the environment and then what's leaving the environment on there as well. Now, again, this starting space won't populate until after we get configured. And there's a couple of different ways in which we can configure Sophos Central Email. And really what I want to do is go through a high-level explanation of the setup of Sophos Central, how to basically get started on this. And one of the first things that you are going to need to do is you're going to need to come under people or under mailboxes. Either way will get you to the desired result. At the top right-hand side here, we have a setup directory services. So there are essentially three options for getting your people and your mailboxes into Sophos Central. You can do that manually by going and hitting add and adding in your users, or importing from a CSV. That will create all of those accounts inside of Sophos Central. If you go this route, just know that any changes that you make inside of your mail, you add a new alias, a distribution list, whatever the case may be, those have to be manually updated here as well. The recommended methods are going to be utilizing the directory synchronization. We do have an on-prem AD synchronization tool. This is an installer that would be on your Active Directory controller. So if you are still on an on-prem Exchange environment, you will be able to utilize this. We'll grab all of those users, their mailboxes from there. Anything that's updated, any aliases that are changed, new users added to the systems, those will be synchronized into Sophos Central automatically. And for the rest that are on Office 365, we have our Azure AD integration. The Azure AD integration with Office 365 is going to allow us to grab all of your users, groups, their aliases, and anything about their system, and again, synchronize that information into Sophos Central. That way, any changes you make in that user's account automatically get reflected inside of Sophos Central. These two methods are going to be what I would say is the primary method for getting the information into there. If you are on G Suites, we do not have a connector with G Suites just yet. That is something that will be coming in the early parts of next year. So for G Suites, you will need to do an export of those users and mailboxes and import those. Once we have that directory services, you'll be able to connect that and again, maintain that up to date on there as well. So step one, anytime you're getting Sophos Central email set up, get your mailboxes set up inside of the system. So again, we're coming under people or we're coming under mailboxes to enable that. And once we have that set up, this is what you'll see inside of the environment. You'll see your actual mailboxes in here, which again, I only have 2 inside of my account. You'll also see any distribution lists that you may have as well. Now, from a licensing standpoint, when we are looking at this and you saw number of protected mailboxes on my dashboard was 2, the reason for that is because I have 2 mailboxes in here. So the way we count that is going to be based on mailboxes or shared mailboxes inside of the environment. Total number of shared mailboxes, total number of mailboxes inside of there gets you to your total. There is no additional cost for aliases. There's no additional cost for public folders or distribution lists inside of there. If I was to click on my mailbox here, you'll see all of the different aliases. These are being brought in from the Azure AD synchronization. So anytime I add a new alias inside of 365, that is automatically being brought into my system here. On this page as well, just one thing to point out while we're setting up that user, if you do have somebody that is doing any sort of a mass mail and they're not using a constant contact or some other service on there, definitely let us know that they are going to be doing that. Make sure you request that bulk sender privileges inside of there. If not, those will be flagged when they are sent out in those mass mail messages. So again, step 1, mailboxes.
And I just want to add, when you're asking for that bulk mailbox, it does take them sometimes it can take them a few hours or a day to get to it. But so just plan in advance on that.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got the mailboxes set up. Now we're ready to move on to the next step. And the next step is going to be determining which mode we are going to be going through. So if you are on Office 365, the preferred and easiest method to that is going to be utilizing our Office 365 mail flow rules. And what this does is you will need access, you'll need admin access into your 365 account for that customer in order to do this. And what we will do is we will connect into that account, create that API application. We will also configure the connectors and the mail flow rules to send that traffic from Microsoft over to Sophos Central. That way it can be scanned on both inbound and outbound. The beauty of this method on here is it does not require any changes to the MX record. Your MX records still point to Microsoft. All mail flows in and out of Microsoft. The other thing that you can do with the mail flow rules, which we cannot do on gateway mode, which I'll show you in just a moment, is the default on here is full domain, which if we go into an MX record change, you are changing the full domain. So if you are wanting to start and do a test of the Sophos Central email and the customer was not ready to commit to moving every single mailbox over, you can create an Office 365 group, add those mailboxes that you want inside of that group, and instead of taking the full domain, you would just filter out those groups. So this could be 2 users, this could be 1 user, this could be 50 users out of the environment. Whatever we have inside of that group is what we are going to push in via the API to the mail flow rules, and those will be the only accounts at that point we will be filtering. And you do select your inbound and outbound direction on there. This is very easy to set up. Once you go through, you add your domain, you log into your 365 account. Generally takes about 15 minutes for it to write all of those rules into 365. Sorry. Still getting over a little bit of a cold here. So once we write all of those rules inside of there, you'll now have mail flowing through Sophos Central. You'll be able to go to your logs and reports and into message history, and you'll now see that mail flowing through Sophos Central again. This is the recommended method if you are on Office 365. It's very quick and easy. If you are on Reflection right now and you are converting, you don't have to move your MX record right away. Now, you do have to get it done to stop being billed for Reflection and get that removed from there, but you can keep Reflection in place while implementing this, again, for that test group of users inside of there, and then roll it out to the full domain for everyone. At that point, shift your MX record back to Microsoft. Make sure you turn your smart hosts off, let everything flow back out through Microsoft as well. And again, we're just grabbing that information as it's flowing through 365. So the second option, and again, it really is up to you. If you have 365 and you don't want to use the API on there for that, you don't have to. At the top section here, you will see domains and settings. It's the third option down under email security. And this is all going to start with, this will say right here, email gateway setup. This is going to be the pointing your MX records over to Sophos. And this starts with a verification of ownership for your domain. So you will need to give us the domain, and then you will need to go through and verify that domain ownership. That verify of domain ownership requires that you have access to the DNS records for that domain. You will need to create a text record on there that has a code inside of it that will be generated here under this domain verification. Once that has been verified in there, this will be ticked as a checkbox. And the next part will be configuring the inbound and outbound. You can do just outbound, but again, for the system to be effective, you really need to have both inbound and outbound traffic flowing through Sophos. So for this, you are going to give us your mail host destination on there. If you have different components with MX, you can have that set up here. Again, it's primarily going to be mail host. You're going to give us either the IP or the fully qualified domain. If you're running 365, you can just grab that fully qualified domain from them. If you're running G Suites or an on-prem Exchange server, grab your IP or, again, FQDN on there and port number that we're going to be sending that to, again, typically port 25. For the outbound gateway, if you are doing 365 or you are doing G Suites on there, you can simply select one of those. We already know the IP addresses of where those are coming from. Basically, this is an authorization that your smart host is going to be sending us that information. So we need to know the IP address that we are going to be trusting. If you are doing an on-prem server, you will need to select custom gateway, give us your IP address that we will be sending emails from. That way we do not deny that message as it comes through. Once this is done, you will need to go in at that point in time. You will need to make your change to your MX record, and you'll need to point that over to Sophos Central. When you get done with this step here, it will actually let you know what servers you need to point that to. So it'll give you the exact first and second MX record for that. It'll also give you inside of your mail server on your receive connectors the IP addresses for Sophos Central. So that way you can only allow messages to come in and be accepted after they've passed through Sophos Central. It will, at the bottom of there, give you your relay address on there. It's going to be your smart host relay. It will be in the form of a fully qualified domain. So again, make sure you populate that into your smart host as well. I definitely recommend making sure your MX record is done first. Make sure mail is flowing through Sophos Central. And then that last step on there is making sure that that's smart host. And again, check your logs to ensure that traffic is flowing both ways. So with that, you've now got email set up. You've got your mailboxes set up. We've determined whether or not we're going to be using the mail flow rules or the gateway mode. The only thing left to do at this point would be to come into the policies. Now, the policies on here are going to be set up in there by default. There will be a base policy. This base policy can be controlled at the partner level. You can see mine has a little lock on it. There are partner level templates. So you can see this says locked at the partner level that can be applied to this. We also have data control. This is a DLP. That DLP is a transfer DLP. Anything that's going through this system based on the rules that you set up for inbound and outbound, we can take actions on those. So if it is, PCI, HIPAA information on there, or some other information you deem as sensitive, you could either block that, or you could even potentially mark that as to be encrypted. So Sophos does have a built-in on our email advanced product. We have a built-in push encryption. There is no additional cost for that. The push encryption will be a secure PDF exchange. So once that email is caught in there, we will basically require a password for that. Generally, you're going to have an email sent out to the recipient. They're going to create that password, and then they will get emailed that PDF. Inside of that PDF, they will have to enter their password to open up and get secure access to it. And then they can also click a reply to securely reply to that as well. We do have a pull email encryption that does have an extra cost and works very similar to how Zix does. It is a separate portal-based encryption. So if you want to go that method, it would be something you would need to enable at the partner level and then also turn on for the encryption methods here in the central email. For the email security policy, these are all pretty straightforward and easy. Now, I'm just going to go straight to the settings. You can layer on policies in here as well. So if you have certain users that need different rules or different domains that need different rules in there, you can absolutely set different policies. These are top down inside of the environment as well. So the first policy that hits will be the one assigned to that user. Under the settings, this is going to go through and give you all of the different options from your email filtering. What do you want us to do if malware comes into the environment? Obviously, our recommendations on there are to delete that out of the environment. If you do set that to quarantine for malware, that will only be able to be removed and allowed by an admin. So your end user will not have the ability to go into their self-service portal and allow that and send that across. Malicious URLs, again, our recommendation on there is to quarantine that. By default, we do not have that checked for the end user quarantine, so they will not have the ability to see that in their end user quarantine, and they won't have the ability to go in and take action on it as well. Anything that we've deemed as confirmed spam, and I know Karen mentioned the allowed and block list on there, this is different than that. Allow and block list, if you have it on the block list, it's just a flat out, we block it. So again, anything that you tell us to block will be done. This is anything that's ranked high enough to where we see it as confirmed spam. There is no question on that. Our default action on there is to delete it. Bulk items, and you can see most of mine in here are the defaults. Bulk items, we do tag, and you can tag that subject line with a bulk. And then anything that's suspected spam on there, it's ranked pretty high, but not high enough for us to convict it 100%. We're going to go ahead and send that to quarantine. And again, you can see the default on this is to include that into the end user's quarantine. The next section on here is banners. These are very good. I absolutely recommend utilizing these. These are similar to the total control box that you had at the bottom of your email inside of Reflection. Again, being at the bottom of the email, it may have been missed. These banners are going to be at the top of the message. So you'll just have that yellow warning at the top of there. Caution, this message came from outside of your organization or came from outside of your organization and we were unable to verify that sender. Things that should give the end user a little more insight of, if I see this coming from Karen, but it came from outside of my organization, that's a huge red flag for me. So again, these are great to have on there. You can determine whether or not you want the allow sender or block sender options to be available by simply editing that. You can also determine whether or not you want them to be allowed to report any spam messages to Sophos. On here, make sure before you enable this component that you have outbound gateway set up. The reason for that is when we bring a message in, it will have that header on there. And when that message is leaving your environment, we strip that header from there. What we don't want to do is present this going out of the network. We don't have that outbound gateway. And this allow and block sender is now given to the recipient or whoever you're communicating with so that they have access to go in and allow or block on there. Again, if you're not sure that your outbound gateway setup or you don't want to turn outbound gateway on, but you still want this in there, turn off these options on there for that allow or block sender. Quarantine messages can be set up. We can do up to 4 messages per day. So give us a time zone of where that customer is at, the days that we are going to send those, and the times of day that we are going to send this as well. They are only going to get a quarantine message if there is something new in their quarantine from the last time they received a message. So if I get my 8 a.m. quarantine message on there and I haven't gotten any other messages in my quarantine at 10 a.m., I will not get another quarantine message.
Steve, we did have a question. Do we need that for the API? So I'm going to guess that we're going to go back to the section above the quarantine to the end user message settings, Chris.
We're talking banners. Banners you would want on both gateway and on the Mailflow rules, yes.
Chris, was that what you were referring to, or?
Yeah, everything on this page here does not refer to gateway mode or Mailflow. This is both. So both of these apply. The gateway mode and the Mailflow rules are simply how we are getting the messages in and out of Sophos Central.
Oh, he's asking, do we need to add the gateway even if you have the API?
The API automatically has, so when I was in there and you saw that, there was an option on there for inbound and outbound for the Mailflow rules. As long as you have both inbound and outbound selected for Mailflow rules, you're good. There is no outbound gateway that has to be added for that as well. So there's no smart host when it comes to this. We just need to make sure that both inbound and outbound mail is routed through Sophos, and each of those has their options. I'll go back into the Mailflow here once we're out of this section, and I'll just reiterate and show that again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and not to dive too much into all these because we can be here forever. I'm just going to cover these at a high level, but we do have our sender checks again. These are mostly off by default. You can have the DMARC, the SBF, the DChem header anomalies turned on. You can select what you want to do if something happens to meet one of these sender checks. Do you want it to go to quarantine? Do you simply want to tag the subject on there? Under the enhanced email, again, going in and checking the contents of the messages that are coming in, again, applies to both inbound and outbound, as well as what do you want to do with messages that are unscannable. If they've got content in there, maybe they got a zip file or something that we can't scan, what do you want us to do with it? That could be, take it into quarantine and then don't give it to the end user. They've got to come back to the admin in order to get action to that. time of click protection, which will be new. It's not something that was in reflection. This basically, we take a look at all of the URLs that are coming in on the email. We're going to make sure that there is nothing bad or malicious around those URLs. We will then rewrite those URLs to where then when the user clicks on it, it comes back through Sophos Central. We check that URL again, make sure nothing has changed, nothing has redirected, and then allows them access into that particular site. So again, adding more protection around the URLs that are coming into the environment. Our Intellect's threat analysis, this is our sandboxing technology. As files are being brought into the system, we can detonate those files in our sandbox. So if there is a PDF Word document or anything that has something potentially malicious with it that's being brought into the environment, we can detonate that, open that, run that against all of our protection methods on there. If it's fine, it'll continue on and move forward. If there's anything malicious, again, we can delete that, or again, you can move that into quarantine. Again, if it's suspicious inside of there, tag the subject line, move it into quarantine, whatever the case may be. You will have your reports for all of this, which gives you a detailed analysis of what we saw on that file. If we did deem it malicious on there, your files that are good, we will not have that report for, but anything that's malicious, we'll tell you exactly why we deemed it as malicious, and it'll even give you screenshots of that particular file detonating inside of the environment. And then the last one on here, impersonation protection. This is on by default and definitely something that you should be utilizing. It doesn't require any further communication on there, but what is a very good idea is to go into the VIP management settings here and identify those VIPs inside of your environment, your CEO, your HR directors and managers, and anybody who could potentially be, their name or their title could elicit somebody to, drop their guard. If the CEO emails you all of a sudden and says, hey, I need a check and I need you to follow this link inside of there and have that sent out, we want to make sure we have that impersonation protection on there. And that will throw a banner. Again, you can decide banner on there. You can decide to drop that to quarantine. You can delete it, whatever the case may be. The default is a banner, but it will throw a banner on there letting you know that, this sender is trying to impersonate somebody inside of your organization.
All right. There is a question on the URL rewrite before you jump back. So the URL, and it was actually a great question. So the URL rewrite will send, when clicked, it runs it through the sandbox. Doesn't matter.
No, so the URL rewrite does not go through the sandbox.
Oh, sorry.
So we analyze and take a look at the URLs, make sure that the URL is correct, and then that email may be sitting there. So the reason for this type of attack is an attacker may send out an email message that has URLs that are all pointed to a known good spot. That server that they're hitting may at some point in time change. That's a very common tactic to get around some of these protections and redirect over to a malicious web server. So what happens is, while that email is now sitting in your mailbox, we've checked it as it came in, great, but now it's hours later, day later, whatever,
month later,
and you've come in
the request.
A month later, whatever the case may be, you click on that URL, it goes back to Sophos. Sophos grabs that URL, checks and verifies it to make sure that it's still going where we saw it going, and then allows that user, making sure that there's nothing malicious, anything that's gotten added into the block list. So it's essentially adding, a web filtering component into your email as well.
So if it goes to a malicious place, that's where you can select what happens to the message with the actions.
To the action. So yeah, they would get a block on there that they're not allowed to get to that website. And that would come from Sophos Central. So that does not require them to have our endpoint or anything else on there. Again, that request is going through Sophos Central. It's being checked, and until we allow it and pass it along, they're not going to get there.
Awesome. All right.
And just to come back into settings real quick, just because we had a question on that for the inbound and outbound, right here on the mail flow rules, again, full domain, inbound and outbound for the direction on there. Just make sure that those are set up, and you can do that. And you can see here when I come in, you do have options. The default option is inbound and outbound. If for some reason you only wanted inbound, again, you can have that. I wouldn't turn on your smart banners with the options for the the allowed and block list on there. But this does give you the ability to go in and, again, make a change. If I didn't want the full domain, which is the default, and I only want a certain group, I can select that inside here, hit save. That'll go in. I will have to authenticate, but that'll go in and rewrite those rules inside of my environment. And what you're going to see under logs and reports here, if we come under message history, you will see the mail flowing in and out of the environment. And if I take and bring this back to a later point in time, we'll see all the different categories on there, whether it's bulk, it's legitimate, any impersonations or anything else that I have inside here. So here's an impersonation message on there, which basically common name. I'm one of the VIPs inside of my environment, and this came from a Steve Weber at Gmail. Now, simply my name on there is not enough to do that, but it will look at the context. So it is AI based, so it looks at the context of what's being asked in the messages on there to determine, and again adds a little bit more around there to make sure that we are going through and at least identifying that impersonation, or if you're wanting to, marking that into quarantine so it's not hitting your end users. But this is going to have a full list of everything coming in and out of your environment. And if you were to click on any of these messages inside of here, it is going to give you all of the details. This is inbound. Here's where it came in. Here's the identifier for that as well. So you can come in and block the sender or domain. The reason for that, and this one was marked as bulk. Again, here's the IP address of where it came from. You can also see what was done with this as well. So here's where it was accepted, processed, and marked into quarantine. Another really cool feature on here is we have the full raw headers available as well. So if you're trying to figure out, more information as to why this is getting blocked, where did it come from, copy this, go to MX Toolbox, drop this into their header analysis, and get a full breakdown. You don't have to go and request the headers from your end user. You have that available right here. So just a convenient component that we add in from an admin perspective. The only other thing really, you do have a full set of reports on here as well. This is the only other one in there that I will say a lot of our partners will take a look at. And obviously mine is not very convincing on there because I only have 2 mailboxes, so it's pretty easy to figure out. But this is going to give you your license usage summary inside of the environment. You can set your time on there. So we do bill on the 22nd. So you can put this from the 22nd to the 22nd to determine which mailboxes are contributing towards your license usage inside of the environment. So this is very handy. You can see right here when I went on December 1st from 1 mailbox up to 2 mailboxes. So it really gives you a good flow inside of there. Obviously, as you have bigger environments, this will let you know exactly which mailboxes and which mailboxes were added during that time. So if you ever need that, this is fully exportable. If you want to export that into a CSV or PDF, once you find the correct report view that you're wanting on there, you can absolutely do that as well.
Steve, can you go back to the reporting to show the logs, like the delivery lines and for both, because
message history.
The inbound and outbound. And
yep. So this is inbound and outbound. You would see both inside of here, and you can see the little arrows at the top here, inbound and outbound. So I do have both. I do think I have some inbound and outbound inside of my environment. I don't generally send a whole lot of email out of a test environment. But here's all my messages that I have sent from my 365 over to my Gmail account.
All right, and I have one more question that came in. So, Chris, the question is, if a mailbox is removed from Office 365, is it removed from Sophos Central?
If you are using the Active Directory or Azure AD synchronization, yes.
Exactly. And if not, and you remove it from Their mail server, once we stop seeing mail flow for it for more after 30 days, then it's dropped from billing.
Correct. Yeah, so our billing is based on usage. So let's say this B. Allen account here was created, but never had a single email going to it the entire month. We would not see any usage for that mailbox. Therefore, even though it's a mailbox inside of your system, you would not be billed for that. Now, the chances of no mail coming into that particular mailbox is probably slim. Now, if it's 365, obviously 365 is going to say that that account doesn't exist, so it won't even hand it over to us. At that point, it'll get denied before it ever reaches us. But if this is in gateway mode setup and all the MX records and everything are pointing to us, even if you deleted that account out of 365, we're still accepting it, and chances are that user is probably still getting spam. They're probably still getting bulk messages. So use 365, use the directory synchronization. Once we have the G Suite synchronization on there, definitely utilize that. But if not, make sure you have a process flow inside of here to come in. And once an account is deleted from, if you're doing a different mail service altogether, it's not any of the ones I mentioned, maybe you're on Postini or whatever, come in and have a process. So if we delete this here, somebody also knows they come in and delete it in Sophos Central as well.
All right, so the next question was about mail relays. So one thing to note, yes, Reflection let you send mail out through Reflection for outbound if you had like a bad IP or a questionable IP or an IP that was being blocked. Sophos will let you send mail out through Sophos, but you have to have, you're going to pay for it basically. It's inbound and outbound, things like that. For a scanner,
scanners we do not support. So we do not support the ability for you to use us as an authenticated login and relay for those scanners and printers or copiers that need to go through. So for those, you'll either need to get that set up against your mail server or 365, or there are a ton of services out there that offer that that authenticated option for scanners and copiers to be able to send out.
Thank you all.